before we get to World War I, kind of this space in between. So 1898, the Spanish is the end of the Spanish-American War, or the entire war happens in 1898. World War I doesn't start until 1914, and we don't get involved until 1917. In between that time, President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, is elected president, and he is going to add on to the Monroe Doctrine with something called the Roosevelt Corollary. A corollary just means like addition to. So the Roosevelt Corollary takes this Monroe Doctrine that says that the Western Hemisphere is closed to European exploration, and adds to it that we're going to be the world police over here, okay? If another country owes you money, we'll collect it for you. You can't come over here and try to collect money from Cuba or from any of these other Latin American countries. That's our job. We'll send it to you, but you can't come over here. At the time, the issue is the Dominican Republic, but we are going to establish ourselves as the debt collector on our side of the world. We declared that the U.S. would act as an international police power. So when we look at our foreign policy, when we question, well, why did we go in such and such place? Why did we do such and such? And why are we the world police? This is established in 1904 for national security interests, okay? Anytime that we intervene in foreign affairs, it's almost always under the guise, I should say, of national security, of keeping our country safe. And we would go out and collect debts. We will intervene in other countries. Roosevelt had enforced this Roosevelt Corollary with something he called big stick diplomacy. Big stick diplomacy just says that we don't have to actually use violence against you. We don't actually have to attack another country. We can just use the threat of force to force other people to do what we want them to do, or force other countries to bend to what we want them to do. The threat of violence, according to Roosevelt, is actually more effective than the use of violence. And we see this again in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan, and we see this currently with the Trump administration. That's their foreign policy, that we are going to establish ourselves, that just understand we have the ability to use violence if we need to, but we would like to negotiate through other means. U.S. troops frequently intervene in Latin America because of this big stick diplomacy. We're going to overthrow leaders we don't like. We're going to arrest leaders that we claim have committed crimes against the United States. Yes?
Are we going to talk about the banana wars?
No, we're not going to talk about the banana wars. But that falls into this category of intervention in Latin America. President Taft, William Taft, is going to use something called dollar diplomacy. Dollar diplomacy is, we're not going to use the threat of war necessarily. I mean, we'll use it if we need to. But we would rather lend these countries money and have them in a position of debt where they owe us something, then we can control them that way. We can control them through almost like financial manipulation. We will send troops. American companies, American bankers, will lend money to these countries. If they cannot pay that money back, or if their payments are late, we'll use the military to go in and try to collect this money from these countries. That creates more resentment in Latin American countries because it keeps them in a position where they are kind of subject to the United States. Like they are independent, if you will, but we can go in and use our military anytime that we want. Wilson is going to use moral diplomacy. Wilson is going to partner with countries that promote democracy or practice our form of democracy. We see this with Wilson with the Mexican Revolution and basically this idea that if you want democracy, we'll side with you. If you don't want democracy, we'll just pretend you don't exist. We will not acknowledge your legitimacy. We see the same type of diplomacy used again later in the 1940s and 50s. We'll see it in the 20s a little bit, where we will just formally recognize the countries that practice democracy the way we do, who are willing to adopt Christianity the way we are, or at least open to religious freedom in their countries. But if you're not, if that's not something you're willing to do, we'll just pretend that you don't exist. You're not legitimate. The claims currently, the reason we went into Venezuela and took their leader, he wasn't a legitimate leader. Okay, that's what is kind of the international agreement, is that he wasn't legitimate. He wasn't legitimately elected. Therefore, we have the right to do it because we don't recognize him as the official president of Venezuela. So these policies we can trace through time, over time, I should say, through different administrations, kind of using the same type of foreign policy. All right, World War I. World War I, there's four main causes of World War I. First cause is militarism, which is the policy of building up strong military force around the globe. Lots of countries are building up a strong military for national security and defense, but it starts to look like they're willing to use that military as force against other countries. Then that causes other countries to want to build up their military to protect themselves. So what we see is this mass armament of countries around the world trying to protect themselves from other countries who may become aggressive. European countries had also used war to get more power, to go out and conquer different colonies, different land, raw materials, trade routes, access to trade partners, all of the things. That is historically how Europe has operated. So militarizing is a way to protect yourself in case some of these stronger European countries decide they want your land for whatever resource that you have. Alliance systems, I'm going to go back to that for just a second. One of the reasons that the U.S. builds a large navy is because we have an empire that's so large, we have to have something to protect our colonies, especially when you have colonies out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is happening in other countries too. Building up strong armies and navies in order to protect their colonies around the world. The A stands for alliances, okay? Alliances between countries act as a method of protection. If you are in an alliance, let's say the U.S., Mexico, and Canada have an alliance with each other, our vow is to protect each other. If somebody attacks one of our countries, we'll go to their defense, or we'll go to their aid. When we look at World War I, it is a war of alliances. A lot of the people involved in the fighting in World War I had absolutely nothing to do with the outbreak of World War I or the conflict that leads to the outbreak of World War I. They fight because their ally had been attacked and they're coming to their allies' defense. There are two main alliances in World War I. There's the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente, which is Britain, France, and Russia. When we join this war in 1917, we are going to join on the side of the Triple Entente. The I stands for imperialism. Lots of countries are going out and imperializing the same way that we are. But when you are the victim of imperialization, when it's your country or your territory that's being taken, that creates resentment. This is going to increase tension throughout Europe. And the N stands for nationalism. Nationalism is it's like patriotism on steroids, okay? It is the willingness to put the needs of your country over everything else, okay? Over yourself, over your neighbor, over your children, over your family. What the country needs to survive is the most important thing. And this creates kind of an intense sense of pride in people. They're willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure the future of their country. And these strong feelings of patriotism and nationalism are pretty intense between some of these countries that are fighting, particularly in places like Germany, Austria, Hungary, Serbia, and some others. When we look at the alliance system, here how we kind of get involved in this not how we get involved, how this conflict breaks out. Really, the issue is between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. That's really the issue. But because a Serbian national is going to assassinate the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, so the person is supposed to be going into power. When that happens, that's kind of all hell breaks loose. Because now both alliance systems are going to be drawn into a conflict that really only had to do with these two countries, okay? And I think I made this graph for my on-level students to help them visualize it. Y'all don't have to copy that down, but it's just there. So, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he is the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, meaning he is next in line. He goes out on a parade, I forget exactly where he was, and he is assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. The Serbian government then is officially blamed. They are like, the claim is made that the Serbian government sent him intentionally to assassinate the Archduke. Because he didn't see him as the legitimate heir. There was a conflict over the territory. The details of it, I'm not too sure. Carson, do you know? Because this is probably something you've probably studied.
It's very complex, but basically, the Serbians wanted independence from Austria, particularly the ones in Bosnia. So some Serbian nationalists went and decided they wanted to shoot the Archduke because he was going into Sarajevo, which is like the capital of Bosnia, and that was like pretty disrespectful, so they had to shoot him up.
Oh, so like the whole reason, he was like kind of like texting like, I'm leaving your territory.
Right.
And then they were like, no, you're not. And then they shot him.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which had nothing to do with us, to be quite honest.
Really?
Yeah, nothing to do with us. However, again, these alliance systems is what draws everybody into this conflict. So Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia, and then that is when all of the allies are going to come to each other's aid. Allies rush to defend each other, like I just said.
So did we defend the Serbians or?
We are on neither side initially. Okay, Britain and France and Germany are always going to be not Germany. Britain, France, and Italy. Italy?
No, it's really just Britain and France that we're trading with, and then the Germans start sinking our trading ships. We're like, you can't do that.
Yeah, we'll get to that part. We'll get to that. I promise. I will get there. Our alliance with Britain is close because of our history with Britain, right? Because a lot of people that were colonized by Britain here. So there is a close like kinship tie with Britain, which makes our alliance system with them almost natural. Then of course you add on to the element of trade with Great Britain and France. When we join Russia, that's the other country. When we join, we're just gonna join on the side of Great Britain and France and Russia. All right. World War I is a new kind of war because it is total war. When we say total war, our country, particularly, our entire country is going to work towards the war effort. It is the entire country either producing for the war, volunteering for the war. You're going to become a nurse, you're going to become a doctor, you're going to work in a factory that makes ammunition. You're going to go overseas and be willing to fight. Everybody has a role to play. And this concept of total war is what makes the United States the powerful, kind of the economic powerhouse that we are in the 20s after the war and in the 50s after World War II. Yes?
This is when we were the river, right?
No, that's World War II. All of the country's resources are devoted to war. That means that you're not wasting anything. You're saving what you can so that you don't have to buy as much stuff at the store, so that the stuff that's commercially made can be sent overseas to support the war effort. And when we say there's no distinction between soldier and civilian, what that means is that it's not just the soldier's responsibility to go across the ocean or go wherever it is and fight. It's everybody's responsibility to support the war effort. Most of this conflict is fought in trenches. which is a new type of warfare in and of itself. It is fought in trenches because we have a new invention. We have figured out a new way to kill each other, and that is machine guns. Now, machine guns can rapid fire bullets. I mean, I don't know the exact speed, right? But a lot faster than a rifle or a musket could before. And so what happens is that soldiers are going to dig trenches to be able to protect their position, but because there's constant gunfire over their heads across these trenches, they can never make any progress. You can't get out of the trench because you'll get shot, so they just keep digging further and further. And when we look at an aerial photo of these trenches, I mean, they all stay in almost the same area because nobody can make any advancement. Due not just to machine guns, but machine guns are going to be the reason we dig the trenches to begin with. Yes?
So in the beginning, like, we were just like in the field?
I mean, we weren't there, but yeah, I mean,
Like
they're fighting out in the open. Yes?
So, is this where the thing came from where it's like we rode in on horses and that's insane? Was this?
I have no
Well,
clue.
yeah,
Like,
Like, it was that small amount of, complete technology.
Like, this,
advancement.
like, the advancement.
Most of the fight, yes,
I was just gonna say, did you know this part of France is still uninhabitable because of the war?
because of the mines that are all left there.
No, not the mines, just because like all it's toxic, the land is.
Radiation is what they call it.
I believe that. Okay, most of the fighting occurs on the Western Front. The Western Front is an area between Belgium and France where these trenches are dug, and where most of this fighting occurs. No man's land is the area between the trenches, okay? So both sides are digging these trenches to fight from. That's their fighting position. And the area in between is nicknamed no man's land because you cannot cross it, okay? Like if you get out of this trench and you try to cross and advance to the enemy's side, you're gonna die. First of all, if you don't get caught up in the concertina wire and the barbed wire, then you might get blown up by a mine, you might get shot by a machine gun, there are grenades, I mean, all of the things you think of in war. This no man's land, or the fact that we cannot cross no man's land, is going to lead to a stalemate, meaning years of fighting and nobody is advancing on the Western Front. What was your question, Bella?
Who set it up? Who set the barbed wire? Like the people that.
Yeah,
I'm
still confused on like who, how.
So within the trench, you would have a gunner who, or several, right? It's not just one. You have gunners who come up on this rest right here, they stand here, and they fire over these sandbags. So if you see an enemy on the other side, you're gonna be firing. But if there's no enemy fire, that nobody's firing at you, or you don't see anybody, then there is peace, if you will, for the time being. Your goal is to kill the other people, right? But if you try to pop out, right, you set up your own barbed wire, whoever asked that question. You set up your own barbed wire to protect your position, right? If the enemy happens to make it across no man's land, are they gonna be able to make it through that barbed wire into your trench? Probably not.
How did they set up the barbed wire if they were always constantly?
And then within the trenches, I mean, these were pretty, not advanced, but pretty intricate, trenches, because they would have rooms where they could sleep, like a dugout where they would have like a cot. They would have rooms where they could, eat, something to sleep on. They would have rooms where they could eat. They had rooms where they kept, or I say rooms, but where they kept ammunition and whatever they needed to fight. Soldiers would spend 3 to 6 months in the trenches, and then they would go back home, not home, but go back on rest. They might rest a couple months and come back. Some of them become so shell-shocked, which is essentially PTSD, so shell-shocked that they cannot return. In the trenches, the conditions in the trenches are pretty not fun. There are rats a lot of times. The trenches would flood when it would rain. The side, obviously because of the water, would create mud. There's a Charlie Chaplin film, I can't remember, I think it's called At Arms, where he kind of does like like an imitation of fighting in the trenches, where he's like trying to sleep in this cot in the dugout, and like the water is rising from all the rain, and he's just like he's kind of making fun of how like the conditions were.
He wasn't making fun of people, he was making fun of the situation.
Like kind of the situation, like how absurd it was that this is what we were doing. So this fighting from these trench positions is what leads us to a stalemate, the inability to cross over to the other side. Because if you popped your head up too high, you would end up getting shot. Other new weapons of war, German submarines, also called U-boats, are going to be used to sink ships out in really the open seas. This brings the war to the sea. Like, so you've got your trench warfare or your land war happening on land, but we've got the Germans also indiscriminately sinking ships out in the open. We call this unrestricted submarine warfare. They don't care if it's a merchant ship, they don't care if it's a naval ship. The Germans will sink anything that comes within their territory or where they have decided they're going to patrol. When we look at the causes, the things that bring the United States into the war, this is one of them. Okay, unrestricted submarine warfare and the sinking of the Lusitania. In World War I, airplanes are a new technology. Now, we're not flying people around like on bombing missions. Airplanes are used mostly for reconnaissance, okay, to see the enemy's position, to see what they might have.
Could they shoot them down?
I don't know that they have, I mean, they try. I don't think they have anti-artillery yet, but by World War II, the next conflict that we get into, yes, we have anti-aircraft, not anti-artillery.
Usually they just like shoot at them with their rifle.
Yeah, they shoot them with their M16. If they're low enough, I mean, you can put enough holes in like the fuselage, maybe you can bring it down. But it's a very new technology, still very new technology. Tanks are going to allow us to advance across no man's land. This is kind of the big thing. When we look at how are we able to get out of the trenches, how are we able to end the stalemate after 3 years, tanks are one of those things. Because tanks can roll over those mines, tanks can roll over the dead horses in the middle of no man's land, tanks can roll over the barbed wire, the concertina wire. They're able to allow the armies to advance through no man's land and that stalemate. The other thing is that by the time the United States gets involved in World War I, the war has been going on for 3 years. We are coming in completely fresh, right? We're coming in with freshly trained troops. They're not tired or fatigued from war. They're not affected by post-traumatic stress or any of those things. And we've got the entire country behind us producing for the war effort.
So it's like tagging someone in, like getting a sub in?
Yes.
Why was it underlined?
They would break down all the time. They would freeze, like the parts would freeze, but breaking down was the big issue because they were new, like a new technology. Kind of think of like when any of these big car manufacturers come out with like a brand new vehicle. That first year or two, there's like always kinks that have to be worked out. Like they'll have recalls for like the seatbelt doesn't work properly or the door doesn't close because it's a brand new technology. So the same thing happens with these tanks. They break down a lot, but when you got a lot of them, you can afford for one or two to break down every now and then, so you can hop in another one. Yes.
The engine was inside the tank and it wasn't separated from the crew, so it would spew out like carbon monoxide, and they had to wear these like special masks and stuff, and it was really just horrible. Like most of the time the crew was like half naked.
It does not sound like a place I would have been. All right, other new technology, the machine gun. The machine gun dominates the battlefield because it can shoot hundreds of rounds a minute. It is not a single shot rifle that you have to reload after every single shot. It's a little bit more accurate, especially if you're shooting long distances. It's more accurate than, or for your defensive positions than say a pistol or a rifle. And they do a lot of damage. You don't have to aim so closely with a machine gun because you can just basically mow people down with it. Now, you're not going to hit every single yeah. It's not like you're going to just go like this and you're going to watch all the people fall. Like, it's not the movies. But you can it's a lot more deadly than shooting with a rifle because it shoots so many rounds so quickly and you don't have to stop and aim for each one. Yes.
Why are they wearing masks?
We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about
Is
that.
this the war with like the gases?
This is the war with the gases.
I know about this one.
Okay. Another new technology of World War I is the invention of mustard gas. Mustard gas is invented by the Germans. It is used though by both sides to basically root people out of the trenches. It is a nerve agent. It would essentially freeze your respiratory system to where you couldn't breathe and you'd suffocate to death. So we invent gas masks to deal with this use of poison gas.
But didn't they like store it?
Well, I'm sure it's not as advanced as it is now, yeah, but if you could put on a mask and breathe through even an early respirator, early technology, you could get out of that gas. It gives you time to get out, so you're not suffocating, laying in the gas trying to escape. People, sure, they still die from exposure to it, yeah. All right, let's stop there. I know we didn't finish World War I, but.
We did good though, we did good. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be positive.